If you've been watching our show for a while, you know Brian and I are always looking for the newest thing to help us improve production
Well,
and
it
make
doesn't
more
have to
money
be the
on the farm.
newest, just something that makes money. That's what we want, something that makes money.
And we've got one obstacle on our farm besides Brian, it's our dad. He's in his late 60s and, you know, he just doesn't want to spend money anymore on the farm. And so we really have to study things and evaluate them on our farm a little bit before we can get Dad convinced, you know what, it's worth the investment.
Well, a lot of times we just spend the money anyway. If we know it's worth the investment, we're not afraid to take a few chances, but we want the farm to be getting better all the time. Well, anyway, you know, it is rare when our dad comes to us and says we need to spend a bunch of money, but Darren was telling me just, well...
I'll tell a story.
Yeah, okay, you go ahead.
Well, I was talking to Dad a little bit about this, and we had some late planted soybeans this year because it was a really wet spring in our area and it was tough getting everything in. So Dad was very concerned, you know what, our beans aren't going to get real tall this year. We're going to have things that pod fairly low to the ground. We need an air reel on the farm or we're going to have trouble out there. I said, really, Dad, you think it'd be worth the investment? He said, you know what, I think on those kind of fields where we plant late, where the beans are short and they're potted low, he said, it could be in an extreme year 5 more bushels of beans that we pick up. And he said, you know, on a year like this, we could pay for an air reel in 1 year.
Well, we've got 3 different combines we'll use on soybeans, and there was one day this fall, we had the other 2, the newer combines running on some corn. So we decided to send the old combine out there with no air reel into some short beans. I went out there and I just said, no, this just isn't going to work. We got down there with the air reel. It definitely made a difference. Here's what we're finding with the air reel and why this is important. So it was fairly late in the season when we were cleaning up these wet spots. The beans were really short, so it was hard to get them to feed in to begin with. You just chew them up at right at the head, right where you're cutting them off, and you end up with 2 problems. Some of the beans just don't go in. Some of the beans, as soon as you hit that crop and it's a little drier, if the beans are drier, they're going to shatter out of those pods. So with this air reel, what it's doing is it's forcing air, pushing those beans toward the combine. So anything that may be lost, usually before it hits the ground, it gets pushed with that air into the header and we catch those beans. It definitely made a difference.
Well, the other thing is it just keeps a consistent flow. And when you've got a combine and you're slugging stuff through, you just aren't doing a good job. It's not feeding in evenly and you aren't maximizing the capacity of that machine. If you're using the air reel, it seems to force things in a little more even. So you end up with your combine working more efficiently out in the field as well.
So you can go maybe just a little bit faster, basically, hopefully have a little bit less loss at the header, just do a little better job out there. So, you know, again, coming back to this spending money thing, we don't like to just spend money for no reason, but there are times, there are situations where there are some different things, different ways you can do things to help the whole process. In this air reel, yeah, you know, in the beginning, I wasn't all that excited about it, but now that I've seen it run on our own farm, I just say, I think we might have to get 2 of those because we run 2 combines most of the time.
It's like everything else, especially with Brian. Oh boy, I don't know, I don't know if we should spend the money. I don't know what kind of return we'll get. And then all of a sudden he sees it and he's like, wow, this is great. We need to do it on all our combines and get going. So all of a sudden you kind of have to hold Brian back a little bit once he does get fired up about something. But we did evaluate an air reel on our farm this year. It was a successful test for us.
Yeah, but
this year in our soybeans, it did make a difference on the shorter beans.
Yeah,
getting stuff through.
The tall beans, though, I really don't think it made that much difference. So if all of your beans...
we didn't have any shattering issues, though, this year. Last year, there was a lot of shattering problems, and I think if we would have had it a year ago, we'd probably say something a little bit different.
Right, but we were combining our beans at 13 or 14%, and you know, we were there right when we needed to be. So there are just different situations there where it may not pay for you. So if next year happens...
It's not going to hurt you, though. That's the whole thing. It's not. You're not going to lose anything by doing it. You just may not have the advantage under ideal conditions. But if you get into something where it's a little less than ideal, so it could be a huge deal for you if you've got small grains, I would say the speed of combining is going to pay for itself every year. If you're able to go just a little bit faster, boy, that makes a big difference to get the job done.
Yep, you should have more time for weed control, especially if you've got our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to stop it coming up later in the show.